Imagine walking into a luxury car dealership, ready to fulfill a lifelong dream, only to be humiliated and fired because of your age and appearance. That's exactly what happens to Claire Mitchell, a 78-year-old widow determined to buy the sports car she and her late husband dreamed of. But instead of backing down, Claire decides to do the unthinkable. She buys the dealership. This is a story of resilience, transformation, and second chances, as Claire faces obstacles, builds a team, and creates something much more powerful than a business. Will her bold gamble pay off? Stay tuned to find out. Don't forget to like, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to my channel for more inspiring stories. Now, let's explore Claire's journey and see how an act of defiance leads to an unexpected revolution. The morning sunlight streamed through the curtains of Claire Mitchell's bedroom, casting a warm glow on the framed photographs that adorned the walls. Her life, captured in black and white stills, told a story of joy, love, and loss. Claire opened her eyes slowly, savoring the peaceful quiet of the early hour. Her body felt the pull of age, but her mind was as sharp as ever. Today wasn't just another day, it was the day she had been waiting for. Claire pushed herself up, her hand instinctively reaching for the photograph on her bedside table. It was a picture of her and Ben, standing beside a red sports car, both of them beaming. Ben, her husband of 50 years, had passed away 3 years ago, but his memory was as vivid as ever. The car in the picture had been their shared dream, a luxury they promised each other but had always postponed. She held the photo closer. "Today's the day, Ben," she whispered, her voice soft but resolute. "I'm finally going to get that car we dreamed of." Claire set the picture down and moved to the bathroom, her movements slow but deliberate. At 78, she had lived a full life. She had been a teacher, a philanthropist, and, alongside Ben, had built a real estate business that helped revitalize their community. They had focused on others for so long, but now she felt it was time to do something for herself. Breakfast was a quiet affair. Claire sat at her small kitchen table sipping tea and gazing out at her garden. The flowers Ben had planted still bloomed brightly, a small reminder of his presence in her life. The air smelled of fresh rain from the night before, and the day felt full of promise. Claire's mind wandered as she stirred her tea. She thought about the times she and Ben had talked about buying that car. They had always put it off, choosing instead to invest in their business, raise their children, and support their community. "There's time," they would say. But time had slipped away, and now Ben was gone. Claire sighed, the familiar pang of grief tugging at her heart. But it was softer now, a companion she had grown used to. Today, though, felt different. Today, she would make that dream a reality. She finished her tea and stood up, the movement slow but sure. Claire walked to her bedroom and opened the closet, selecting a simple but elegant outfit, a navy blue dress Ben had always loved. She put on her pearl necklace, a gift from him for their 40th anniversary, and stood in front of the mirror. "You're going to do it, Claire," she said to herself, adjusting the pearls. "You're going to buy that car." Her driver, George, was already waiting in the driveway when Claire stepped outside. He smiled as he opened the door to the sleek black car. "Good morning, Mrs. Mitchell," he greeted. "Where to today?" Claire smiled back. "Good morning, George. We're going to the luxury dealership downtown. It's time I finally get that car." George raised his eyebrows but said nothing as he helped her into the back seat. He had worked for Claire for several years and had grown used to her quiet determination. As they drove through the city, Claire watched the familiar streets pass by. She had lived here for decades and seen it change. New buildings had replaced the old, and the neighborhood was now a hub of activity and growth. But some things stayed the same. The memories, the places she and Ben had frequented, the landmarks of their shared life. The drive was short, but it gave Claire enough time to reflect. She remembered Ben's voice, always calm, always full of optimism. He would have been so proud of her today, she thought. He had always believed in her, in everything she did. And now, as she approached the dealership, she felt a surge of excitement mixed with a trace of apprehension. This was it, the moment they had always talked about. She was going to buy their dream car. The dealership was a gleaming palace of luxury. Bright lights reflected off the polished floors, and the smell of new leather filled the air. As Claire stepped inside, she felt the weight of her decision. This wasn't just a purchase. It was a symbol of everything she and Ben had built, everything they had sacrificed for. She walked through the rows of cars, her eyes drawn to the sleek lines and shiny exteriors of the high-end sports models. Her heart raced with excitement. These were the cars she had always dreamed of. But the dealership staff didn't seem to share her enthusiasm. Claire noticed the sidelong glances, the dismissive smirks from the young salesman as she walked by. It was subtle at first, just a look here, a whisper there. But it soon became clear that she was being judged, not as a customer, but as an old woman who didn't belong in such a place. Matt Lawson, the dealership's manager, finally approached her. He was young, sharply dressed, and his smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "Ma'am, can I help you?" he asked, his tone condescending. "Are you sure you're in the right place?" Claire smiled politely. "Yes, I'd like to see the latest sports car models, please." Lawson raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised. "Our cars are high-performance vehicles," he said, his tone barely hiding his disbelief. "Perhaps you'd be more comfortable looking at something a little more practical." Claire's smile faltered for a moment, but she quickly recovered. She had faced worse in her life. This was just another test of her resolve. "No," she said firmly. "I'd like to see the sports cars." Lawson glanced at his colleagues, who snickered quietly. "Of course," he said, turning on his heel. "Follow me." Lawson led Claire through the dealership, pointing out various models with a practiced air of superiority. Each time she asked a question, he responded with thinly veiled impatience, as though her presence was an inconvenience. "This model here," he said, gesturing to a sleek red convertible, "is one of our best. But perhaps it's a bit much for someone your age. Maybe you'd prefer something with a little less power?" Claire felt the sting of his words, but she kept her expression neutral. She wasn't going to let him get under her skin. "I've worked hard for this," she said quietly. "I know what I want." Lawson's smirk grew. "I'm sure you have, ma'am," he said, clearly not believing her. "But you see, these cars require a certain level of skill. Perhaps you'd like to visit our sister dealership. They specialize in more appropriate models." It was the final straw. Claire felt her composure slip as anger and hurt surged within her. She had expected excitement today, not this humiliation. But instead of lashing out, she took a deep breath, letting the anger settle into something far more powerful: determination. "Thank you for your time," she said, her voice icy. "I'll take my business elsewhere." As she turned to leave, Claire noticed the smirks and whispers growing louder. But instead of feeling defeated, she walked out of the dealership with her head held high. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. On the drive back home, Claire's mind raced. She thought about the years she had spent building a business with Ben, the sacrifices they had made, and the respect they had earned. And yet, here she was, being dismissed as an old woman who couldn't handle a car, let alone fulfill her dreams. But Claire knew better. She had faced adversity before, and she had always come out stronger. This wasn't just about a car anymore. It was about respect, about proving to herself and the world that she wasn't defined by her age or appearance. When she arrived home, Claire went straight to her study. She sat at the large oak desk that had once belonged to Ben and picked up the phone. Her lawyer and trusted friend, Daniel Parker, answered on the second ring. "Daniel," she said, her voice firm, "I need you to do something for me. Find out everything you can about the ownership and financial situation of the luxury dealership downtown." Daniel hesitated. "Claire, are you sure? What are you planning?" Claire's eyes hardened with resolve. "I'm going to teach them a lesson in respect," she said. "And I'm going to buy more than just a car." The next morning, Claire sat at her desk, sipping her tea as she waited for Daniel Parker's call. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from anticipation. Last night's events had been a rude awakening, but Claire was no stranger to challenges. If anything, they only made her stronger. She had spent years navigating the harsh realities of business, and now it was time to put those skills to use. Her phone rang, breaking the silence. Claire picked it up with steady hands. "Claire, it's Daniel," came the familiar voice of her lawyer. "I've done the research, just as you asked. The dealership is owned by a man named Ethan Brooks. It's been in his family for years, but they've run into financial trouble. The place is drowning in debt." Claire's lips curled into a small, satisfied smile. She had expected as much. "Good," she said. "Now, Daniel, I want you to prepare the necessary documents. I'm going to buy the dealership." Daniel paused on the other end. "Are you sure about this, Claire? It's a big move, and there's no guarantee it'll be easy." Claire's voice was steady. "I've never backed down from a challenge, Daniel. This is about more than just a car now. It's about showing them and the world that age and appearance don't define capability." With the details set in motion, Claire felt a renewed sense of purpose. She wasn't just buying a car, she was about to reshape an entire business. As the days passed, Claire couldn't help but feel the weight of her decision. There were moments when doubt crept in, whispering that she was too old to take on such a monumental task. She had worked hard all her life. Hadn't she earned the right to rest? But then she thought of Ben, of their shared dreams, and how they had always put others before themselves. Claire had never been one to back down from a fight, and she wasn't about to start now. One evening, as she sat in her living room, she found herself staring at a photo of Ben. His eyes, captured in the frame, seemed to twinkle with encouragement. Claire smiled softly, remembering his constant faith in her. "I'm doing this for us," she whispered, her resolve hardening once again. "I'm not backing down." A few days later, Claire decided to visit the dealership again, this time with a different purpose. She wanted to get a sense of the people who worked there, who might be worth keeping and who might not fit into the new vision she had for the place. As she entered the showroom, she was greeted with the same cold stares from the sales staff, but one face stood out. A young woman, her wheelchair partially hidden behind the service desk, was busy reviewing paperwork. Her name tag read Sarah Jones. Unlike the others, Sarah didn't seem bothered by Claire's presence. In fact, she offered a warm smile. "Good morning, ma'am. Can I help you?" Sarah's voice was friendly, without a hint of condescension. Claire approached the desk, intrigued. "Yes, actually, I was wondering if you could tell me a little more about the service department here. Do you work with the cars directly?" Sarah nodded, her eyes lighting up with enthusiasm. "Yes, ma'am. I'm a mechanic. I know it might not look like it," she glanced down at her wheelchair, "but I've always had a passion for cars, especially sports cars. I help with the maintenance and repairs when I can." Claire felt a spark of recognition. Sarah reminded her of her younger self, full of determination and ambition, but often overlooked because of superficial judgments. "You seem very knowledgeable," Claire said, impressed. "What's your favorite part about working on cars?" Sarah grinned. "I love the mechanics, but what excites me the most is the design. I've always dreamed of working on cars that are accessible to everyone, regardless of their physical abilities. Imagine a sports car designed with modifications for someone like me." Claire's heart swelled with admiration. Here was someone who didn't let limitations define her. She could tell that Sarah's passion went far beyond the surface. "Have you ever thought about designing cars yourself?" Claire asked. "Oh, it's a dream," Sarah admitted, her smile faltering slightly. "But there aren't many opportunities in this industry for someone like me." Claire's mind was already spinning with possibilities. Sarah's vision aligned perfectly with what she wanted for the dealership. A place where innovation, respect, and inclusivity were at the forefront. "Well," Claire said, leaning closer, "what if I told you that opportunity might be closer than you think?" As Claire left the service desk, she continued her exploration of the dealership. In the back, she noticed a young man working diligently on an engine, his hands greasy but moving with precision. He didn't notice her at first, his concentration fixed on the task at hand. Claire approached, clearing her throat slightly to get his attention. The young man looked up, startled but polite. His name tag read Mark Davis. "Sorry, ma'am. Didn't see you there," he said, wiping his hands on a rag. "Can I help you with something?" Claire smiled. "Just watching you work. You seem very skilled. How long have you been doing this?" "Since I was a kid, pretty much," Mark replied, a hint of pride in his voice. "My dad was a mechanic. He taught me everything I know. But I'm actually studying engineering, trying to get my degree so I can design cars instead of just fixing them." Claire's interest was piqued. "Engineering, you say? That's impressive. Are you close to finishing your degree?" Mark's face fell slightly. "I was, but tuition's expensive. I've been working here to save up, but it's been slow going. I've had to take time off from school." Claire could see the disappointment in his eyes. He was young, talented, and full of potential. But financial struggles were holding him back, much like she and Ben had experienced in their early days. "I see," Claire said thoughtfully. "And if you could finish your degree, what would you do?" Mark's face brightened again. "I'd design cars, maybe even start my own line one day. Something innovative, like cars that are more environmentally friendly, but still powerful." Claire nodded, impressed by his ambition. "Well, Mark, I have a feeling your future might be brighter than you think. Keep an eye on things around here. Big changes are coming." Mark smiled, unsure of what she meant, but grateful for the encouragement. Several weeks passed, and Claire's plan began to take shape. With Daniel's help, the acquisition papers were finalized, and Claire was ready to make her move. Ethan Brooks, the dealership's owner, had been avoiding her calls, but she finally arranged a meeting. The day of the meeting arrived, and Claire walked into the dealership with her head held high. Sarah and Mark were both at their posts, exchanging confused glances as Claire was ushered into the back office. Ethan Brooks sat behind his desk, a man in his late 50s with a tired expression. He glanced at Claire, clearly not expecting her. "Mrs. Mitchell," he said, his voice polite but weary. "I'm not sure why you wanted to meet with me, but I assume it has something to do with your visit a few weeks ago." Claire smiled, but there was a steeliness in her gaze. "You assume correctly, Mr. Brooks. I'm here to discuss the future of this dealership." Ethan raised an eyebrow, leaning back in his chair. "And what exactly do you have in mind?" Claire slid the acquisition documents across the desk. "I'm buying it. The entire business. Your financial troubles are no secret, and I believe it's time for new leadership." For a moment, Ethan stared at the papers in shock. He hadn't expected this, a simple customer turning into a serious business threat. He fumbled with the documents, his hands shaking slightly. "You can't be serious," he muttered, flipping through the papers. But as the numbers stared back at him, the truth became impossible to ignore. The dealership was in dire financial straits, and Claire's offer was more than generous. "I'm very serious," Claire said calmly. "You've run this place into the ground, and it's time for someone who understands what customers really want. I'm taking over, Mr. Brooks, whether you like it or not." Ethan slumped in his chair, defeated. He knew there was no way out. Claire had the upper hand. With the acquisition complete, Claire prepared to make her first public appearance as the dealership's new owner. She returned to the showroom, where Matt Lawson stood at his usual post, arrogantly chatting with a couple of young salesmen. When Claire walked in, the room went silent. The staff, already informed of the change in ownership, stared at her in disbelief. Lawson's smug grin disappeared the moment he saw her. "Mrs. Mitchell," he said, his voice strained with forced politeness. "I didn't expect to see you again." Claire smiled, but there was no warmth behind it. "I'm sure you didn't, Mr. Lawson. But as it turns out, I'll be seeing a lot more of you from now on. You see, I'm the new owner of this dealership." Lawson's face paled as the reality sank in. The salesmen around him exchanged nervous glances, unsure of what to say. Well, that's certainly unexpected," Lawson stammered. "Is it?" Claire replied coolly. "Considering how you treated me last time, I suppose it is. But I want you to know something, Mr. Lawson. This business is going to be run differently from now on. We will treat every customer with respect, no matter their age, appearance, or background." Lawson opened his mouth to respond, but Claire cut him off. "And if you can't adapt to that," she added, "I suggest you look for employment elsewhere." Lawson swallowed hard, clearly stunned. Claire turned and walked away, her steps firm and confident. Sarah and Mark watched from the side, their admiration for Claire growing. The dealership was about to undergo a transformation, and they knew Claire would lead it with strength and integrity. The papers had been signed, the deal finalized. Claire Mitchell was now the official owner of the luxury car dealership, a place that had once humiliated her. Yet, despite the victory, a growing unease settled over her. The reality of running the business quickly hit Claire harder than she expected. Sales were slow. The existing clientele, who had grown accustomed to the previous management, were not as welcoming to the changes Claire had envisioned. Worse yet, the dealership had been bleeding money long before Claire had taken over. The renovations and rebranding she wanted to implement would require far more capital than she had initially planned. Claire sat in her new office, a large glass-walled room that overlooked the dealership floor. The hum of conversations and the clicking of keyboards from the staff barely registered in her ears. Stacks of financial reports lay spread out in front of her. The numbers were worse than she had anticipated. Debts from suppliers, unpaid taxes, and operational expenses that kept piling up. She sighed deeply, rubbing her temples as the stress began to mount. This was supposed to be the moment when everything changed, when she would turn the dealership into a beacon of respect and dignity. But the weight of the financial reality pressed down on her like a heavy stone. Had she made a mistake? A knock on the door pulled Claire from her thoughts. It was Sarah, her wheelchair rolling in quietly across the tile floor. "Mrs. Mitchell, I'm sorry to interrupt," Sarah began, her voice hesitant. "But I just wanted to check in. You've been working late every night. How are you holding up?" Claire managed a weak smile. "I'm doing fine, Sarah. Just trying to figure out how to make this all work." Sarah wheeled closer, her brow furrowed with concern. "If there's anything I can do to help, please let me know. We all believe in what you're trying to build here." Claire nodded, grateful for Sarah's support, but the doubts still lingered. Could she really pull this off? The changes Claire introduced at the dealership weren't met with open arms. While Sarah and Mark were eager to help transform the business, many of the older staff were resistant. Some had been there for years, accustomed to doing things their way, and they saw Claire's new approach as an unnecessary disruption. Matt Lawson, the former manager, was especially vocal in his opposition. Though Claire had made it clear that disrespect wouldn't be tolerated, Lawson still carried himself with an air of entitlement, subtly undermining her authority. He would make snide remarks during meetings, question her decisions, and stir up dissatisfaction among the other employees. One afternoon, Claire walked into the break room to find several staff members huddled together, speaking in hushed tones. The conversation stopped abruptly as soon as they saw her. She could feel the tension in the room. "Is there something you'd like to share with me?" Claire asked, her voice calm but firm. Lawson stepped forward, arms crossed over his chest. "We were just discussing how things have changed around here. Some of us are finding it hard to keep up with all the new rules." Claire met his gaze without flinching. "The only rule is that everyone, customers and staff alike, is treated with respect. If that's a problem for you, Mr. Lawson, then perhaps this isn't the place for you anymore." Lawson smirked, but it didn't reach his eyes. "We'll see about that." Claire left the room, her heart pounding. The resistance was growing stronger, and it was beginning to infect the other employees. She knew that if she didn't get things under control soon, everything she had worked for could unravel. The stress was taking its toll. Claire had been pushing herself too hard, staying late at the dealership to review financial reports, overseeing the staff's training, and trying to find ways to cut costs without compromising the quality she wanted to deliver. It happened one evening as Claire was sitting in her office, staring at the glowing screen of her computer. Her chest tightened, and she felt a wave of dizziness wash over her. The pain was sharp, radiating down her arm. Claire gasped, clutching the edge of the desk as her vision blurred. Her phone was just out of reach, and as she struggled to stand, the room seemed to tilt. A wave of panic shot through her. Was this it? Was she about to collapse, right here, in the office where she had fought so hard to make her dreams come true? Summoning every ounce of strength she had left, Claire managed to reach the phone and dial for help. Within minutes, an ambulance arrived, and Claire was rushed to the hospital. Claire lay in the hospital bed, the sterile smell of antiseptic filling the air around her. The doctors had told her it was a minor heart attack, brought on by stress, they said. She would recover, but she needed to take it easy. Take it easy? Claire scoffed at the thought. How could she take it easy when her entire life's work was on the line? When the dealership she had fought so hard to acquire was teetering on the edge of failure? Daniel, her lawyer and oldest friend, was the first to visit her in the hospital. "Claire," he said gently, pulling a chair up to her bedside, "you need to slow down. You've been through so much, and this business. It's important, but not at the cost of your health." Claire looked away, tears stinging her eyes. "I can't, Daniel. I can't slow down. If I don't keep pushing, everything will fall apart. I've worked too hard to let it slip away." Daniel sighed. "I know, but you can't do it all on your own. You've got people who believe in you. Sarah, Mark, they want to help. Let them." Claire remained silent, her mind racing. She had always been the one in control, the one making decisions and fixing problems. But now her body was betraying her, reminding her that she couldn't outrun time forever. After being discharged from the hospital, Claire returned home, but the sense of isolation grew deeper. She felt vulnerable in a way she hadn't before, the weight of her mortality pressing down on her. Every time she looked in the mirror, she saw not the strong, capable woman she had always been, but someone fragile, someone who might not have what it took to finish what she had started. She stopped going into the dealership as frequently, delegating more of the day-to-day tasks to Sarah and Mark. But even as they worked tirelessly to keep things running, Claire felt like she was losing control. The dealership was slipping through her fingers. One night, as she sat alone in her living room, Claire picked up a framed photo of her and Ben. She stared at his face, his kind smile that had always given her strength. "I'm sorry, Ben," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I don't know if I can do this. I thought I could, but it's too much. Maybe I was wrong to think I could take on something this big." The house was silent, the only sound the ticking of the clock on the mantel. Claire's heart ached with the weight of failure. For the first time since Ben had passed, she felt truly alone. Just when Claire thought she had reached her breaking point, Sarah and Mark showed up at her door one evening. They had sensed something was wrong when Claire had stopped coming into the dealership, and they weren't about to let her give up without a fight. "Mrs. Mitchell," Sarah said, rolling her wheelchair over the threshold as Mark stood beside her. "We've been working on something. We know things have been tough, but we want to help. You don't have to do this alone." Claire looked at them, her heart swelling with gratitude. "I appreciate that, Sarah, but I don't know if it's enough. The business, it's struggling, and I don't know if I can keep it going." Mark stepped forward, his eyes determined. "We believe in what you're trying to build here. You've given us both a chance when no one else would. And now, it's our turn to help you." Sarah pulled a folder from her bag and handed it to Claire. Inside were the blueprints for an accessible sports car, something Sarah had been working on for months. "We've been brainstorming ways to bring in more customers," Sarah explained. "This is one of the ideas we came up with, a sports car that's designed with accessibility in mind. It could open up a whole new market for us." Claire stared at the plans, her mind spinning. Could this be the solution she had been looking for? Could they really make this dream a reality? With renewed energy, Claire agreed to give Sarah and Mark's idea a chance. They worked together, tirelessly, to bring the accessible sports car design to life. It wasn't easy, there were setbacks and moments of doubt, but they pushed through, knowing that this project could be the key to saving the dealership. They reached out to investors and car enthusiasts, drawing interest in the innovative design. Slowly, but surely, word began to spread. The dealership, once struggling, started to see a rise in foot traffic. Customers came not just for the luxury cars, but to be a part of something new, something revolutionary. And with every step forward, Claire's confidence began to return. She was no longer isolated in her struggle. She had allies, people who believed in her vision and were willing to fight alongside her. But just as things were starting to improve, another blow came. One of their largest investors pulled out at the last minute, leaving them short on the funds needed to finish the accessible car prototype. Claire felt the familiar pang of despair creeping back in. It seemed like every time they made progress, something knocked them down again. She called an emergency meeting with Daniel, Sarah, and Mark, determined to find a solution. As they sat around the conference table in the now empty dealership, the tension was palpable. "We can't let this stop us," Claire said, her voice shaky but determined. "We've come too far to give up now." But even as she said the words, Claire knew they were running out of options. They needed the funds, and without them, the dealership might not survive. The setback from the lost investor hit Claire hard. It felt like the ground had been yanked out from under her just when they were making headway. But as Claire sat at her desk late one evening, staring blankly at the financial reports, she received a phone call that changed everything. "Mrs. Mitchell? It's Cheryl Franklin from the Millbrook Chamber of Commerce. We heard about the work you're doing with the dealership, especially your new focus on accessibility, and we'd like to help." Claire blinked in surprise, her tired mind struggling to process the news. "Help? In what way?" "Well," Cheryl continued, "your project has caught the attention of a lot of people in town. We're organizing a community fundraiser to support your vision. People around here remember what you and your husband did for Millbrook back in the day. It's our turn to give back." Claire's heart swelled with gratitude. She had spent years working in this community, never expecting anything in return. And now, when she needed help the most, they were stepping up for her. It felt like a lifeline had been thrown just as she was about to sink. "That's incredibly kind of you, Cheryl," Claire said, her voice thick with emotion. "I don't know what to say. Just say you'll be there, Mrs. Mitchell," Cheryl replied warmly. "We've got a lot of people excited about this." The news of the community fundraiser spread quickly, and within days, businesses from around Millbrook began to reach out. Local restaurants, small business owners, and even neighboring car dealerships wanted to get involved. Claire was amazed at the outpouring of support. Sarah and Mark jumped in to help organize the event, reaching out to their own networks and drumming up interest from potential sponsors. They worked tirelessly, coordinating everything from the venue to the marketing materials. As the plans for the event grew, Claire received another piece of good news. A group of eco-friendly car enthusiasts had heard about their project and wanted to partner with them. They were particularly excited about Mark's design for a hybrid sports car, one that combined accessibility with environmentally friendly technology. For the first time in weeks, Claire felt hope blooming inside her. She wasn't alone in this fight. Together they could turn things around. With the fundraiser approaching, Claire threw herself into the preparations. She worked closely with Sarah and Mark, ensuring every detail was perfect. Slowly but surely, the pieces began to fall into place. One evening, as they were finalizing the guest list for the event, Mark pulled Claire aside. "Mrs. Mitchell," he said, his voice hesitant but full of respect, "I just wanted to say thank you. I don't think you realize how much you've done for me and for Sarah. You've given us both opportunities we never would have had anywhere else. And now, well, now we have a chance to make a real difference." Claire felt a lump rise in her throat. She had been so focused on the financial challenges that she had forgotten to step back and appreciate the impact she was already making. Mark's words reminded her that this wasn't just about keeping the business afloat. It was about transforming lives, just like she and Ben had always dreamed. "I'm proud of you, Mark," Claire said, her voice thick with emotion. "You and Sarah have worked so hard to bring this vision to life. I couldn't have done it without you." Mark smiled, a look of quiet determination in his eyes. "We're going to make this work, I promise." The day of the fundraiser arrived, and Millbrook's community center was packed with people. Claire stood near the entrance, greeting old friends and new faces alike as they filed in. The air buzzed with excitement as local vendors set up booths, and the sound of live music drifted through the hall. Sarah and Mark were busy overseeing the event's logistics, ensuring that everything ran smoothly. In the center of the room, the prototype for their accessible sports car stood on display, drawing the attention of every guest who passed by. The sleek design, coupled with its innovative features, was already sparking conversation among attendees. As the event got underway, Cheryl Franklin took the stage to welcome the crowd. "Thank you all for coming tonight to support one of our own. Claire Mitchell," Cheryl began, her voice ringing through the room. "Claire has been a pillar of this community for years, and now she's doing something extraordinary with her dealership. She's not only transforming the business, but she's creating opportunities for people who've been overlooked by the industry for far too long." The applause was thunderous. Claire, standing in the crowd, felt a wave of emotion wash over her. It was the validation she hadn't realized she needed, the proof that people believed in her vision just as much as she did. As the evening progressed, Claire made her way around the room, speaking with investors, car enthusiasts, and potential partners. She could feel the energy shift. People were genuinely interested in what she was doing. The fundraiser wasn't just about raising money anymore. It was about building a network of support that would carry her vision forward. One conversation in particular stood out. A representative from a major automotive company approached Claire, intrigued by the accessible sports car design. "Mrs. Mitchell," he began, extending his hand, "I've been following your story for a while now, and I have to say, what you're doing here is remarkable. My company is very interested in collaborating with you on this project. We believe there's a huge market for accessible, eco-friendly vehicles, and we'd love to discuss a potential partnership." Claire's heart skipped a beat. A partnership with a company of this size could provide the financial backing they needed to fully realize their vision. She smiled, shaking his hand firmly. "I'd love to discuss that further," Claire replied, feeling a surge of excitement. Despite the evening's success, there was one final loose end to tie up. Matt Lawson, the former manager who had openly resisted Claire's changes, had shown up at the fundraiser. He stood off to the side, watching the event unfold with a look of disdain. Claire spotted him lingering near the exit and made her way over. Lawson straightened as she approached, a smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Looks like you've really turned this place into your little charity project," he sneered. Claire met his gaze without flinching. "This isn't about charity, Matty. It's about building something that matters, something that treats people with dignity and respect." Lawson scoffed. "You really think you can keep this place afloat with all your idealistic nonsense? Businesses like this don't survive on good intentions." Claire's expression remained calm, but her voice was firm. "This business will survive because it's built on a foundation of respect, innovation, and community. You didn't understand that, which is why you never belonged here." Lawson's smirk faltered. He seemed to realize, perhaps for the first time, that Claire had truly succeeded where he had failed. Without another word, he turned and walked out of the building. As Claire watched him leave, she felt a sense of closure. Lawson had been the embodiment of everything she had fought against: arrogance, prejudice, and entitlement. Now, with him gone, she could focus entirely on the future she was building. With the fundraiser a resounding success and new partnerships on the horizon, Claire's vision for the dealership seemed closer than ever to becoming a reality. The funds raised that evening, combined with the potential collaboration with the automotive company, gave her the confidence she needed to move forward with the production of the accessible sports car. A few weeks later, the prototype was complete. Claire, Sarah, and Mark stood in the dealership's showroom, admiring the sleek vehicle that symbolized everything they had worked for. It wasn't just a car, it was a statement, a testament to what could be accomplished when people came together to break down barriers and challenge expectations. As Claire ran her hand along the hood of the car, memories of Ben flooded her mind. She could almost hear his voice, encouraging her, telling her how proud he was. Tears filled her eyes, but they were tears of joy, not sadness. "Ben," she whispered, her voice trembling, "we did it!" That afternoon, Claire climbed behind the wheel of the prototype. Sarah and Mark stood by, watching as she adjusted the seatbelt and started the engine. The powerful hum of the motor filled the air, and Claire felt a rush of exhilaration. "Are you ready, Mrs. Mitchell?" Mark asked, grinning. Claire smiled, the weight of the past few months lifting from her shoulders. "I've never been readier." She eased the car out of the dealership and onto the open road. As she drove, The sun shone brightly above her, and the wind whipped through her hair. It felt like freedom, like she was finally living the dream that she and Ben had always talked about. Every mile she drove felt like a victory, not just for her, but for everyone who had been a part of this journey. Sarah, Mark, Daniel, and the community of Millbrook, they had all played a role in bringing this dream to life. As she returned to the dealership, Claire parked the car with a sense of deep satisfaction. She stepped out, greeted by cheers from Sarah, Mark, and the staff. The future of the dealership was brighter than ever, and Claire knew that together they could accomplish anything. The day had finally arrived. Claire stood in front of the newly rebranded dealership, now named Mitchell Motors, where dreams drive forward, watching as the last finishing touches were made before the grand opening ceremony. The new sign gleamed in the morning light, a symbol of the transformation she had fought so hard to achieve. Behind her, employees bustled around, preparing for the arrival of guests. The media had been invited, along with potential investors, local community leaders, and customers, both old and new. The prototype of the accessible sports car sat proudly in the center of the showroom, drawing admiring glances from passers-by. Claire took a deep breath, feeling a sense of both pride and relief. After months of struggle, setbacks, and doubt, she had finally made it. But this day wasn't just about celebrating her victory. It was about the people who had stood by her through it all. Sarah, Mark, Daniel, and the entire community had been instrumental in making this dream a reality. As the first guests began to arrive, Claire was approached by Sarah and Mark, both of them beaming with excitement. "Mrs. Mitchell, everything's ready," Sarah said, her eyes sparkling. "I can't believe we're finally here." Mark nodded in agreement. "It's all because of you, Claire. You brought us together and made this possible." Claire smiled, her heart swelling with emotion. "No," she replied softly, "we made this possible. This is about all of us." As the crowd gathered in front of the dealership, the buzz of anticipation filled the air. Claire stepped up to the podium, her hands trembling slightly as she adjusted the microphone. She looked out at the sea of faces, familiar and unfamiliar, all waiting to hear what she had to say. Taking a deep breath, Claire began. "Thank you all for being here today. I can't tell you how much it means to me to see so many people gathered to celebrate what we've built together." Her voice was steady, but the emotion behind it was palpable. "When I first walked into this dealership, I wasn't treated with the respect I believed every customer deserves. But instead of letting that experience defeat me, I decided to turn it into an opportunity. I didn't just want to buy a car. I wanted to create a place where dreams are respected, no matter who you are, where you come from, or what you look like." The crowd nodded in agreement, some smiling in encouragement. "We've built something special here at Mitchell Motors," Claire continued, her voice growing stronger. "This dealership isn't just about selling cars. It's about transforming lives, about creating opportunities for people who have been overlooked, and about showing the world that respect and dignity should never be an option. They should be a given." She paused, letting her words sink in. "I've been so blessed to have people like Sarah and Mark by my side. People who believed in this vision and worked tirelessly to bring it to life. Together, we've created something that I hope will inspire others, both here in our community and beyond." The crowd erupted into applause, and Claire smiled, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. This was the moment she had been working toward, not just for herself, but for everyone who had supported her. As the applause died down, Claire took a moment to gather herself. There was one final thing she wanted to say, something deeply personal. "This dealership has been a dream for me for many years," she said, her voice softening. "But it wasn't just my dream. It was the dream of my late husband, Ben, who stood by my side through all the ups and downs of life. He's no longer here with us, but I know he's watching today. And I want to dedicate this moment to him." Tears welled up in Claire's eyes, and she had to take a deep breath before continuing. The crowd watched in respectful silence, many of them visibly moved. "Ben always believed in me, even when I didn't believe in myself. And today, as I stand here looking at what we've accomplished, I know he would be proud." Her voice cracked slightly, but she smiled through the tears. "This is for you, Ben." The audience erupted into another round of applause, louder and more heartfelt than before. Claire stepped back from the podium, her heart full of gratitude and love. She had done it. She had honored Ben's memory in the best way possible, by fulfilling their shared dream and building something that would continue to change lives long after she was gone. Following the grand opening, the dealership's operations began to run smoothly. The partnership with the major automotive company had been finalized, and together they were working to bring the accessible sports car to a wider market. Orders were already starting to come in, and the buzz around the new design was growing. Sarah and Mark took on greater responsibilities within the dealership. Sarah oversaw the development of new models and worked closely with engineers to make sports cars more inclusive and adaptable for people with disabilities. Her passion and expertise had earned her respect in the industry, and she was quickly becoming a rising star. Mark, having graduated with honors from his engineering program, became the lead designer for the dealership's new line of eco-friendly vehicles. His innovative ideas were pushing the boundaries of what was possible, and investors were eager to see what Mitchell Motors would come up with next. Claire, now content to take a step back from the day-to-day operations, watched with pride as her protégé thrived. She had accomplished what she had set out to do, not only by transforming the dealership, but by empowering the next generation to carry the torch forward. Months passed, and Mitchell Motors continued to grow. The accessible sports car became a symbol of change in the automotive industry, attracting attention from media outlets and industry leaders alike. Claire's vision of inclusivity and respect had taken root, and it was spreading far beyond Millbrook. One evening, Claire sat in her office, now much less cluttered than before, looking out at the bustling showroom below. The dealership had become more than just a business. It had become a community hub, a place where people came not only to buy cars, but to be inspired. As she watched Sarah speaking with a group of young engineers and Mark explaining the latest eco-friendly technology to an investor, Claire felt a deep sense of peace. She had built something that would outlast her, a legacy of respect, innovation, and empowerment. A knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," Claire called, turning to see Daniel, her lawyer and longtime friend, entering the office. "You did it, Claire," Daniel said with a smile. "Look at this place. It's incredible." Claire nodded, her eyes misting with emotion. "I couldn't have done it without you, Daniel." "You've been with me from the very beginning," Daniel chuckled. "You always give me too much credit. This was all you." Claire smiled, looking out at the showroom once more. "No, it wasn't just me. It was Ben. It was Sarah, Mark, and the community. This place, Mitchell Motors, represents all of us." As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow across the showroom, Claire stepped outside for a moment of quiet reflection. The sky was painted with hues of pink and orange, the air warm with the promise of a peaceful evening. Claire took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the years lift from her shoulders. Her journey, one that had started with a moment of humiliation, had led her to a place of triumph. But as she stood there, watching the day fade into night, she knew that the real success wasn't just in the cars or the business. It was in the lives she had touched along the way. Sarah and Mark joined her outside, both of them looking up at the sky. "Mrs. Mitchell," Sarah began, her voice soft, "I just wanted to thank you again. For everything? You've changed my life." Mark nodded. "Mine too." Claire smiled, her heart swelling with pride and love. "And you've both changed mine? I couldn't have done any of this without you." The three of them stood in comfortable silence for a few moments, watching as the stars began to twinkle in the evening sky. "We've come a long way," Claire said quietly. "But the journey isn't over yet." Sarah and Mark exchanged a glance, both of them smiling. "No, it's not," Mark replied. "There's still so much more to do." Claire nodded, her heart full of hope for the future. "Then let's get to it." Several years later, Claire Mitchell passed away peacefully in her sleep, surrounded by loved ones. Her legacy lived on in Mitchell Motors, which had become a model of inclusivity and innovation in the automotive industry. Sarah Jones took over as CEO, continuing Claire's work with passion and dedication. Mark Davis remained as the head of design, leading the company into new ventures with his groundbreaking ideas. But perhaps Claire's greatest legacy was the way she had inspired those around her. Her story, a story of resilience, determination, and compassion, became a beacon of hope for others who faced adversity. And long after she was gone, the lessons she had taught about respect, dignity, and the power of dreams continued to drive Mitchell Motors forward. The end. Thank you so much for joining me on Claire Mitchell's incredible journey in Wheels of Redemption. If this story touched your heart and inspired you, I invite you to like this video and subscribe to my channel. By subscribing, you won't miss out on more heartwarming, motivational, and empowering stories like this one. Your support helps me continue sharing stories that inspire hope, resilience, and transformation. So, hit that subscribe button, and together, let's keep the power of storytelling alive. More exciting stories are just around the corner. Thanks for watching, and I can't wait to see you in the next video.